Hey everybody, welcome to the SCIF. My name is David Rand. This is Kyle Mack. You are in the secure containment information facility. There you go. We got the sound effects now.
No soundboard, but I'll be the soundboard today.
This is where we go to keep it real, and we are on a mission today, guys. We are going to save their boomer cons from the 2002 time loop they are in right now. They're stuck in time. They literally can't leave the year 2002. Mm-hmm. They still think they're there. They still think that what they did then is going to work now, and we're going to help them out. Mm-hmm. This is really about helping. I'm a helper.
I don't know. I was trying to find, while you were saying that, I was trying to find a way, because what I wanted to talk about today was Glenn Greenwald, and I was trying to slip in a Glenn Greenwald joke of like, oh, that's what he was doing.
No, that's why I'm doing this, because I don't want to talk about Glenn Greenwald and whatever weird stuff he's into. I don't care.
I was like, oh, Glenn Greenwald was going to war with the neocons. That's what he was doing in Brazil. He had it all on tape.
In this household, Glenn Greenwald is a hero who will not be questioned. He's wrong on Luigi Mangione, but other than that, you can't criticize him. Not here.
I haven't seen him talk about Luigi.
Oh, I did a whole episode on it. It was not great.
It was an episode that I was out on. I see.
All right, so Mark Levin. So I used to be a talk radio listener back before MP3s were a thing. And, I'd occasionally listen to Mark Levin. And I really liked him because he was more philosophical than some of the other people on talk radio back in the day. He would get more into the nitty gritty of the law and the philosophy and the history than others. And although his voice is very annoying.
It is. I could never listen to him. It's actually I found him to be very... when all of those guys were the big guys, I was a Glenn Beck kid.
Yeah.
Like I listened to Glenn,
I like Glenn Beck more too.
I listened to Glenn Beck in high school, probably why I'm such like a conspiracy brained person, because Glenn Beck kind of like has those Alex Jones tendencies.
Yeah.
And he got fired from Fox for it. So,
But guess who's still at Fox?
But Mark Levin has a show there, and he's never been a guy that's like, he's always like, he has this like slime ball energy to him that always like feels weird to me.
Yeah. Well, so I did like his book, Liberty and Tyranny. I thought it was a relatively good formulation of conservative thought at the time, but I was kind of on my Ron Paul exit when I read it. So I was kind of like, but this isn't really getting me, quite the same way. But with this, so I want to reach out. We're going to reach out and see if we can pluck them from their time loop.
There is maybe some context here because, we've, especially in SCIF episodes, but also in main show episodes, we've talked a lot about the woke right dynamic, like the James Lindsay criticism of the woke right. We've talked a lot about the like World War II mythologies and the Daryl Cooper stuff. Mark Levin is somebody who has been very like he had a tweet before basically saying, and also on his show, I saw clips of him saying this, where it's just like, neocon is a pejorative for Jew.
Yeah.
Right. So he really falls into that like, any criticism of the warfare state is anti-Semitism type of thing, and what you're doing.
He went so far as to accuse Steve Witkoff of being anti-Semitic.
Yeah. We talked about that in the SCIF episode, right?
Right. So he's losing his mind, and we're gonna get into it with a response to a recent segment he did on Fox News.
Actually, I want to say one thing on the Steve Witkoff thing. It's actually one of those things. Is when I first saw Steve Witkoff was going to be in the Trump administration, I was worried that he was going to be too Zionist.
Me too.
That was actually my concerns going in. Like I said that on the episode. It's just like, I don't know, this guy, he seems to have a lot of Israeli ties that makes me kind of like, Trump's administration is not going to be super good on Israel. But it was always like, I'll be cautious about it. But like, and so far I've been pretty impressed with him, just from like my own foreign policy standpoint of what I would like to see in foreign policy and diplomacy. I've been very impressed with Steve Witkoff.
I think and I had to check my biases. I was like, maybe I went a little too far into he's Jewish, he must be support state of Israel thing. Maybe that was me. Maybe that's not me. Maybe I made an assumption. But I agree. I totally agree. I kind of had the same inclination, especially with the Miriam Ellison thing and the things that are happening in the Trump administration around the time of that he was doing his appointments. I was understandable. But where we're at is, we are. He has been tweeting and was recently at the White House talking to the administration about war with Iran. So we're going to be responding to his most recent segment where he goes all in, and it deserves a response. We'll just dive right into it. Mm-hmm.
But before we get to our great guests, I consider what I'm about to say the most important opening statement that I've ever given on Fox or probably anywhere else. And I've been doing this a long time.
Oh, boy.
And there's no question there will be a cabal out there for which what I say will be viewed as terrible.
That's us.
And I will come under withering attack. There's nothing new about that. But I've always felt that whether it's here or on radio or elsewhere, that my relationship is with you. Not the think tanks, not the Washington insiders, not the reprobates and others who have access to a keyboard and a computer.
Wait, is that us?
wait. Your opinion is literally the think tank opinion.
Yeah, right.
Like you're like all the neocon think tanks that have incubated their ideas through like the Bill Crystals of the world. Like you're the one spitting their talking points. What are you talking about?
Your policy has been the policy of the United States for 100 years, bro. Like, what are you talking about? It's too good, especially when he gets the reprobates with a keyboard and a computer. Like, does he think a computer?
I have a keyboard and a computer.
Oh God! And you could do things with it. You could say things on the internet you shouldn't be allowed to say. Yeah. They're gonna come after me. Like he's some victim.
We need to have a standard.
Yes. Have you even been there?
Never been.
It is funny how he sets himself up as like, I'm going to be victimized for this, as he's on Fox News. On a syndicated radio show and on cable television. He's like, oh, these people with keyboards are going to come after me. Watch out for me.
It's funny.
Let my mother know I love her. You know, like, what is this?
It's funny. This is a bit of an aside, and it's like it's related to the Elon Trump stuff, but it goes into what you said about Fox News. I saw this tweet yesterday that was like CNN, Elon versus Trump, ABC, Elon versus Trump, all of the internet, Elon versus Trump, Fox News. Why do zebras have stripes?
Why do zebras have stripes? That's funny. All right. Let's dive into the real substance here.
This is very important, what's taking place now. This is a headline in the New York Times. Iran has ramped up uranium enrichment while continuing nuclear talks. Tehran now has the capacity to produce bomb-grade fuel for roughly 10 weapons, according to a confidential UN report. So for all intents and purposes, Iran now has a nuclear weapon.
All right, here's the article he brought up. Now, it's interesting because the New York Times changed the title after this or sometime around this, where it's now different. It's U.S. sends Iran proposal on nuclear deal amid reports of uranium enrichment ramp up. Now, what this means is that they had a certain amount of 60% grade uranium, a certain quantity of it, and they have added more to it, according to a anonymous report. Now, notice that, not an anonymous report, sorry, a report from the UN that is not public, based upon the Austrian FBI claiming they've read the report and here are the important things that the public needs to know.
That already is raising flags for me.
Well, what?
Now the Australian FBI would make more sense to me just because it's more in the mix of anything. But the Austrian FBI is like, what is...
Not the Austrian...
Like their domestic police intelligence? Like,
yeah.
Like their FBI is this like...
Yeah, we'll dig further into that, but that's an interesting thing to know up front, that it's one, we can't actually authenticate where this is coming from, with their knowledge base of this, their evidence of it, because it is a confidential report to intelligence agencies to then leak to the press so that he can then say they have a bomb. When the report itself says, quote, while Iran could quickly boost the fuel grade to bomb grade, which is what they've already been since 2004 or something like that, it would take months, maybe a year to produce a workable weapon.
Yeah, they're 5 minutes away every time.
Exactly. Well, but I mean, and this is saying what our intelligence already says, which is that they have a latent nuclear capability, not that they have a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. That is the status they're in. Now, so already he's gone way past what the article actually says. What the report that is dubious itself says, what the Austrian FBI says.
Yeah, I don't get the Austrian FBI connection. It's like,
so
that's the intelligence that we're okay. That just seems like, it's one of those things where like in intelligence gathering, the actual intelligence like operatives, like the agents, they kind of just collect everything and they put everything into a big pile and then they let the analysts kind of sift through everything. This seems like one of those things where it's like it's from the pile and the analysts didn't sift through it yet. Like it feels like one of those things to me where I'm like, it doesn't feel correct to me.
That should shoot something off. And not to mention that the article that he's quoting itself says they don't have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
That they could have one in a year if they decided to pursue that, But the article doesn't actually claim that they're pursuing that. It just says they increase the amount of fissile that they have. Fissile? Fusion? What word am I looking for? Nuclear material at 60% grade. Not what you need for a nuclear weapon, which is 90% grade. So in order to get there, it would probably take about a year to produce a weapon, not 10, but they now have the quantity to potentially eventually produce 10 should they pursue that. Now watch what he does with that information.
We've been negotiating for, 5 weeks? We had the Obama deal. We had the Biden deal. We gave them $100 billion under the last administration, which, of course, they used to build up their nuclear program.
Where did the money come from, Mark? Did we just give them taxpayer dollars? Is that because that's what it sounds like. When he says it like that, does it sound like Obama taxed Americans or printed that money up and gave it to them? Where did it come from, Mark?
Where did it come from?
It was their money. We froze their accounts.
Yeah.
And then gave them their own,
about that.
Not even all of it. Some of their own money back to them after we took it from them.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot it was the frozen money. Like it was not technically ever like our money. It was money that they had that was frozen.
That they had in overseas accounts that we froze. Yeah. And then have been hanging on to, technically, maybe, kind of, or we put them in the general, but I don't know what we do with that money. That's a great question. But even if we did, that would mean that we owe it from. So okay, so it's like this. You stole money from somebody and I took it from you and I gave it back to them. Is that me giving them money? Or you stole money from somebody and you gave it back to them.
How dare you give them their money?
That's not you being generous. That's me giving their money back.
It's you operating how a financial institution that's holding somebody's money should operate.
Right. I'm saying this because I'm a fan of the Ayatollah Khomeini. I'm not saying this because I'm a fan of the government of Iran. I'm just saying that's the facts. That is what happened. That is the reality. The thing that is the moral truth of what is happening is that we took their money and now we're giving some of it back to them in order to incentivize them to come to the table and to sign a deal for nuclear non-proliferation with us, with more inspections.
It's actually an important thing to just recognize on the us holding their money type of a thing. This is a very common thing between nations. I kind of laid out how this works with in my European thesis, where I was talking about the reason why the Eurodollar exists is because this market was set up because the Soviets wanted a place to hold their American assets that was free away from Americans being able to freeze their assets, right? So Iran should have maybe taken a piece from that in history and been like, hey, maybe we shouldn't, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of a...
Well, it's actually do you remember a Pirate Biden thesis?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're literally we're abducting oil and then moving it and then selling it for us. That's a thing that the government does.
That's how money markets work in general. That's actually just how markets operate.
Piracy.
And this is the reason why London is such a big deal, is because they're one of the central hubs for this. Brussels is such a big deal. New York and San Francisco are very big deals because they're very big hubs for this type of activity. Tokyo is another huge one. This is kind of how does a small country like Tokyo, how are they doing so well? It's because they have this massive finance hub that coordinates other people's monies, and people put money into Japanese financial institutions, stuff like that. That's kind of what we're talking about here. So how did America freeze the assets? That's how America froze the assets, because they were being held in New York or wherever.
Right. So Mark Levin has been on this whole JCPOA, the Obama Iran deal for a long time, going all the way back to 2017, interviewing, this is 2020. What year was this? I remember this real quick. 2020. This is his interview with Mike Pompeo, the psychopath who
that good guy
who planned on assassinating Julian Assange because he embarrassed the CIA. Yeah. So going all the way back to this, where he's talking about how bad it was that we gave him their own money back. You're giving $150 billion to the enemy. Even almost $2 billion in cash under cover of darkness in an unmarked plane without the approval of Congress. Well, we didn't take the money with approval of Congress. We did that as a war action, and now we're giving it back. of course, justifying, how evil it is. Therefore, you can't ever cut a deal with it. And that's like his core thesis, is you can't ever cut a deal with evil. Never mind that's literally how we do this with everyone around this evil regime that we also don't like, such as Pakistan, that also has nuclear weapons. And why aren't we trying to screw with Pakistan? Well, maybe because they have nuclear weapons, Mark Levin. Additionally, the reason why they're in this status is because of that. And then on top of that, he advocated for getting out of the Obama deal and celebrated when Trump did. So everything that comes after this, keep that in mind, because he's going to be so complainy about how all of this is all a ruse to really develop a nuclear weapon. Even as greater insight into doing that, we don't have to, if we had the JCPOA, we wouldn't have to rely on a confidential report from the UN that was leaked to that the Australians now leaked into the press cycle so that he could then beat the war drums.
We've been warned about this. We've been warned about it from the Prime Minister of Israel. We've been warned about it from me over and over again. And now we're here. We're at the precipice. And the article goes on, Iran has roughly doubled its stockpile of nuclear bomb-grade uranium over the past 3 months, even while negotiating with the Trump administration over a deal to limit its nuclear program. According to a confidential report about the United Nations Nuclear Inspection Agency, has begun circulating to capitals around the world. Now, the UN isn't exactly pro-American or pro-Israel, but they are very, very concerned about what they're seeing.
All right, so noting that it's leaked to the capitals around the world, not to the public, so that we can't actually see the basis of this. It is simply, it's pretty much right up there with anonymous sources say. And that's how he's going to base this entire thing around it.
The Austrian FBI says.
Exactly. Now, I mean,
I'm still hung up on that.
part of his citation here is how, we should really trust the Prime Minister of Israel when it comes to his foreign policy preferences for what America should do, because he's been so right, so on the ball for so long.
So something I want to add to that too is like a lot of the concerns from the Zionist crowd on Iran and their nuclear weapon program is like literally that like Iran might do exactly what Israel did with their with their nuclear program. Like that's kind of like that's like the weird irony to this with me all the time.
He's gonna do that.
Like I've said my thesis. Like I think that the Trump getting out of the JCPOA was much more about a broader political scheme than it was necessarily about Iran itself. Like it's much more about like France and North Korea and things like that. But the Zionist crowd, like their very deep concern is much more like the Israel-Iran thing. Like,
yes.
I don't think that's as much Trump's concern as it is like guys like Mark Levin, right? But it is just worth noting is like, this was the dynamic that was going on. Like this same type of dilemma is what JFK was going through with the Israeli nuclear program and them like undercutting and sneaking in French uranium and stuff like that, and then them building it outside of the views of the inspectors that were agreed upon that they would have to do. Like it's just ironic in a sense. You know what I mean?
100%. And it's going to get worse on that. But the question is, should we trust this Prime Minister of Israel that is telling us how important this is for America's interest?
About a network of terror. Are there any other nations that you would recommend that the United States launch preemptive attacks upon at this point?
No, the issue is not. First of all, are there other nations that are developing nuclear weapons? Yes.
Should we launch any other preemptive attacks?
First, let me say what they are, and then let me make a suggestion how to proceed.
Thank you.
The answer is categorically yes. The two nations that are competing with each other, who will be the first to achieve nuclear weapons, is Iraq and Iran. And Iran, by the way, is also outpacing Iraq in the development of ballistic missile systems that they hope will reach the eastern seaboard of the United States within 15 years. So I guess that doesn't include California, but includes Washington. But what it does, a third nation, by the way, is Libya as well. Libya is, while no one is watching, under the cloak, is trying very rapidly to build an atomic bomb capability. So you have here now three nations. Not surprisingly, all three have been implicated in the past in terrorist activity using the clandestine means of terror and proxies. Now, The question that you ask, I think, is vital. It's important, and that is, what do you do about it? You can fight all of them. You have to dismantle the network, and the question is, do you dismantle all of it at once? No, you didn't. The first thing you did in facing after the wake-up call on September 11th was that you took on the first regime, the obvious regime that had directly perpetrated that catastrophe. You removed the Taliban regime and you scattered Al-Qaeda, although it has not been completely destroyed yet. Now the question is, what's your next step? Knowing that 3 of these nations are developing nuclear weapons. This is not a hypothesis. It is fact. Iraq, Iran, and Libya are racing to develop nuclear weapons.
Yeah, what happened with Libya? What happened there?
Gaddafi got curvy swords up his butt.
The curvy swords. Exactly. And that's the thing that drives me crazy about this. It's like, are you still in 2002, bro? Mm-hmm. Like, we know that there were no nuclear weapon program in Iraq to be spoken of that was at all a threat to anybody.
Yeah. And very clearly, like, it seems that the Libya situation was much more in regards to like the financial war side of things, of Gaddafi setting up a gold standard, creating his own lira, like all that stuff. That seems to be much more the dynamic that was at play there. But the nuclear threat and aiding and abetting terrorists thing was a nice little note to go in there of be like, maybe we should install a revolution.
Yeah, well, right? According to a former congressman on Tucker Carlson, right, who's not a joke, right? This isn't some crazy conspiracy theory. So the Libya situation makes no sense, and it's interesting exactly which countries those are. Those seems like 3 out of the 5 countries that happen to be on a specific memo that everyone's talking about because it has a scary name in it, Wolf Blitzer on it.
Wolf Blitzer? No, Paul Wolfowitz.
Paul Wolfowitz.
Wolf Blitzer is the Hillary Clinton. Yeah. He's the CNN Hillary Clinton hack.
Yeah, right. Close, but not the same. All right, so
they both have scary names.
Names. Yeah.
It's a wolf.
But that whole thing is so interesting, right? Because it's like, did you not learn that there were no WMDs in Iraq? This is why we don't trust you, Mark. Yeah. No one trusts the UN leaking a thing to the Austrian FBI so that you can then go on and say that they have a nuke, even though that's not what the original article says, because of the war in Iraq, dude. Something happened between 2025 and 2002 that happened, and we got 1 million people died. Tens of thousands of soldiers died and or killed themselves. Hundreds of thousands of people injured. And you just act like none of that happened. And all this thing, there's no lessons to learn. In fact, we're still in 2002, and all you need is that there's a scary, they might do a thing that could be on the weakest evidence, on almost no evidence whatsoever, and then going beyond that to say that they have nukes now is irresponsible. It is completely ridiculous.
And it's also just, Iran is way more, way richer and more sophisticated than a lot of these other nations in the region that we've dealt with in the past. And the terrain itself is a lot more deadly for an actual war to occur. Mm-hmm. Like, it's one of those things where there's a reason why Iran's last on the list, right? Like Iran is the more complicated one for the sake of overthrowing, as just like as a realpolitik geopolitical standpoint. It's like this, like you're putting out kind of the casualties of the past events, like. The casualties are going to be far worse in this type of a scenario.
Yes, and they have a bigger air. They have bigger air force. They have more air defense. They have many more ballistic missiles. They do not have the range that he thinks they do, but
at least not that I've seen in any regard.
I found no evidence whatsoever. And that video was recorded in the early 2000s. 15 years later, they still don't have a nuclear weapon, and they still don't have ICBMs that we know of. There's no evidence of justice. So why are we acting on no information as if it was information? Why are we setting this up as if we knew something we didn't know? It feels a lot like WMDs in Iraq.
It feels like Iraq. Babies and incubators type of shit.
Exactly.
And they should be. The increase gives Tehran the capacity to produce bomb-grade fuel for roughly 10 weapons, up from around 5 or 6 when President Trump was inaugurated in January. But the surge also puts new pressure on Washington in its negotiations, in which it is demanding that Iran cease all production of nuclear material. Now, the Director General of the IAEA, that is the unit within the UN, is responsible for this. His name is Rafael Grossi. Now, Grossi wrote that the significantly increased production and accumulation of highly enriched uranium by Iran, the only non-nuclear weapon state to produce such nuclear material, is of serious concern. You don't need this material for domestic energy consumption.
Yeah. So that's the funny thing is like, yes, they're doing this. They're doing exactly the same thing that Israel did, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, in a different but also similar way that Pakistan did, and we don't want to go to war with Pakistan. Why? Why did the curvy sword phenomena happen in Libya? Because he did. Now,
I want the textbooks to eventually just call it the curvy sword phenomenon. Like when they look back, when your brother is teaching teaching history, world history, and is covering the Libya Gaddafi scenario, the paragraph header is going to say the curvy sword phenomenon.
So that whole thing is like, states want nuclear weapons for rational reasons. Now, to this day, Israel will not admit they have nuclear weapons. Why?
They have a policy that explicitly says that they're not allowed to talk about it.
Why do they have that policy?
Because they have nuclear weapons.
Because it's a better strategic place if you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? And so at each stage of this, of course, Iran wants nuclear weapons. It's the only way to guarantee that they could defend themselves against America. If they get a nuclear weapon or get into the process of it, of course, that will guarantee that we go to war there. So therefore, they're probably not doing that according to our intelligence. That is far more nuanced than what I just argued. Obviously, they're saying we have human intelligence on the ground and signals intelligence. That suggests that. Now, of course, the first thing he has to do, the next thing he has to do is undermine the current existing intelligence understanding.
Then we have this from Fox News. Explosive new intelligence report reveals Iran's nuclear weapons program is still active. A new intelligence report claims Iran is continuing with its active nuclear weapons program, which it says can be used to launch missiles over long distance. The startling intelligence gathering of Austrian officials contradicts the assessment of the U.S. Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard told a Senate Intelligence Committee in March that the American intelligence community, quote, continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003. Well, apparently she's dead wrong.
So Mark's saying that we need to trust the Austrian FBI over Tulsi Gabbard.
Yes.
and the
Yes. And you just imagine, okay, these are the people, his audience are the people who went through the prosecution of J6.
Yeah.
They're the people who saw the FBI set up the Governor Whitmore case. They're the people who saw, the CIA potentially kill JFK. This is his audience. And he's like, actually, now that it's convenient, don't trust the These are the guys who saw the weapons of mass destruction hoax happen in Iraq, and now are all for Trump in part because he's the only one who criticized it.
Most boomers don't believe that there was a hoax.
But he still does.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
Sorry. Most boomers that I encounter still believe that there was weapons of mass destruction in the.
Well, in part because of him.
Because of people
because
like
of
Mark
his
Levin.
lies. Okay, so this is how bad the lie is. In 2007, I found an article where he's saying, we found the weapons of mass destruction. They were chemical weapons, actually, even though that wasn't the case in the first place. The case was nuclear material, and it was about aluminum tubes for delivery of that nuclear material. 2, guess what the weapons were? They were chemical weapons that we sold to him in the Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s that were still around.
Well, it's also just reminiscent of Syria too, in more recent history. Is we went through the whole Bashar al-Assad gassed his own people on 2 separate scenarios. It happened under Obama and it happened in Trump 1.0 of this being like a narrative of like, oh my God, that's why we have to go invade Syria. And it was like, so Trump bombed an airstrip and there's like, this is the first time he's ever been presidential.
Yeah,
like that whole scenario is because of like the weapons type of dynamic, which on its face, every time I've looked at it and it's just like, it all appears to be fabricated. And like all the propaganda, like people around it, like literally the CNN contributor was the granddaughter of Bashar al-Assad's like political enemy. Like that's like this is the type of thing that they do. This is the type of intelligence that we get that makes this happen. So like when all of a sudden he's just like, no, we shouldn't trust the Office of the National Director of Intelligence on what she says about this. Now we should trust the Austrians.
Well, I mean,
like, what the fuck are you talking? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, well, we don't trust our own FBI. How could we possibly trust the Austrian FBI to get us? Not them. They're not saying, therefore, the Austrians should go invade Iran. Of course, that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is, so therefore, America should. I mean, come on, Mark.
This is Austrian theory, right? Aren't you a good Austrian, Dave?
Yeah,
You're
right?
a good Austrian economist.
I'm a bad Austrian.
Why wouldn't you want to go to Iran?
Exactly. It is so insane. It is so crazy. And so like your experience with boomers is a little bit different than mine, because what I've experienced for the most part is people who have either largely forgotten about Iraq and just kind of like washed that away, or have changed, have said like, look, Bush lied us into war. Yeah. And that's what Trump said. He got up there and said, looked at Jeb Bush and said, your brother lied us into war. And it was the dumbest mistake that America's made ever. Right. And that's one of the reasons why he got elected in 2016 and got elected again in 2020, because the foreign policy of the Democrats were a Bush-like foreign policy.
My experience with boomers on the foreign policy topic tends to be that there's like a reverence to the old neocon model, while them currently in the current state of being, like blindly hating the word neocon because Trump hates the word neocon, and Trump is generally anti-war, so like they're now anti-war, but like the mistakes of the past, like there's a cognitive dissonance that never quite registers because they've like followed the new norm. And haven't really like reconciled the ideas.
Right.
So like there ends up being this dissonance where it's like, well, there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, or like, you know, like, so like it
Mark
becomes
Levin told me so.
Yeah, like it's that thing. But and they're still often Mark Levin listeners, but they're also they still often tend to be like new media of like the new MAGA movement listeners. So like there's like conflicting information.
Yes.
And in the brains, the conflicting information hasn't noted to themselves that there is conflicting information. It's like it's not conflicting in their minds. Like that's the dissonance that ends up happening.
Right, exactly right. And this is the part of it. I mean, like, it gets to the crux of it. So Tucker Carlson, you know,
had a really long tweet on this.
Big tweet on this, and I gotta highlight this part of it here. It is.
Tucker's just been great on foreign policy.
Well, I know, and that's one of the big red pills for the boomer demographic right now. You know,
and he's been critical with the Trump administration, where I think there is deserved criticism and stuff like that too. Like he hasn't been like just a guy for it on the whole thing.
Yeah, right. And so this quote right here. Iran knows this, and what Iran knows is that the U.S. government would go to war if it had nuclear weapons, which is why they aren't building one. Iran knows it is unwise to give up its weapons program entirely. Muammar Gaddafi tried, and that wound up sodomized with the bayonet. As soon as Gaddafi disarmed, NATO killed him. Iran's leaders saw that happen. They learned the obvious lesson. So the question is why are they building up a latent nuclear ability? And that's the thing that this goes right by Mark Levin, goes right by the Fox News report. No one questions that. They're just like, well, this is a bad thing because we have to be the rulers of the world. Otherwise, bad things will happen. Not to us, but we're going to give you the impression that it will. We're going to just say they have a nuclear weapon. We're just going to say they can reach the eastern seaboard, even though there's no evidence of that.
Well, it is this thing just like from a political realism standpoint. All countries that don't have a nuclear weapon are in this kind of weird place where they're stuck and forced to be subservient to the bigger nations around them just because of their lack of nuclear capability. Like that's the thing that's like your bulwark against the pressures of the bigger countries.
Right.
Is like your ability to be like, no, if you go too far, there's that threat that exists there.
100%.
So like Iran is in this point where I imagine if I was Iran right now, they want to develop nuclear, like just on the energy side, but they want to have this like capability where if shit goes down, they can quickly make a pivot into a nuclear weapon. And I think them being positioned for a pivot to exist is what the neocons are extremely worried about. Like they want it. There's no capability of a pivot.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
and the Saudis too, right? This is where Israel and the Saudis are aligned because they don't want a Shia power structure that isn't under their control. That's the real thing. And the real thing is about regime change. So, and this is where Tucker Carlson calls him out. So why is Mark Levin once again hyperventilating about weapons of mass destruction? To distract you from the real goal, which is regime change. Young Americans heading back to the Middle East to topple yet another government. Virtually no one will say this out loud. Although we do have someone who said it out loud.
Who said it out loud?
At a Soho Forum debate I think it was last year or the year before. It was Crystal.
Yeah, it was a few years ago. It was Bill Crystal and Scott Horton.
Yes. Yeah. And he says in there, we have the son of the Shah. He's still around and he can take that position. He makes it is, I'm summarizing, but he intimates he drops the cards in that moment and you know exactly what the goal is.
Yeah.
The goal is to topple the government and put in the Shah. As if the 1960s were still here. I mean, it's like conservatives. You're meant to conserve the institutions, not literally play the same playbook over and over again and pretend like something else is going to happen, right? Like the conservative view isn't this, right? The conservative view is not just to do the same things hoping for a different result. The conservative view is to maintain the lessons of our ancestors, the wisdom embedded in our institutions and propagate it to the future so we can have a continuum of institutions and tradition that maintains the thing that keeps society together. They're not doing that. They don't care about that. What they care about only is regime change on behalf of the intelligence and the security state.
Yeah, that is one of those things where you're just kind of like, he said the quiet part out loud.
Yes.
In a debate with Scott Horton of all people too.
Yeah.
That was back in like 2021. It was during the COVID era, I remember, at the Soho Forum there. But that's one of those things where like you want to see just like, actually that's just like, this is a bit of an aside, but like it's one of those things where, you look at the current elite structure and there's been a lot of nepotism that's happened in the current elites. Like Bill Crystal is the, he's the son of one of the big neocons, but like he's not necessarily like an intellectual powerhouse like his father was. Like there's been a few generations of neocons and they're no longer sending their best.
They're degrading like a monarchy. Yeah, like there's too much inbreeding.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Like it's kind of like what I was talking about with the Medici family when I was talking about the Rothschilds and their whole like incest structure that they had for a few hundred years and probably still have now. Where one of the reasons why they have the incest structure in place or had it was because the Medicis lost competent male heirs and all their women kind of got married off. So like the Medicis fell apart because of it. Like these idea structures act like that too, where like they start to lose the power. And you just see that with the Zionists in general. Like there's a reason why Dave Smith is becoming incredibly famous right now. It's because he is throwing down and destroying every single person that's thrown out to debate with him right now.
Right.
It's because he has the sharp sword. He's the one that's like really trained up and he's like the new blood that's like a revolutionary in a sense, like from an idea structure.
Yeah.
Where all of these other people, they've had the institutions behind them this whole time and they've never had to have the big rigorous frameworks to be able to debate effectively.
That's right.
And you saw that with the Scott Horton Bill Crystal debate. You see that with every single debate that Dave Smith is on. Apparently he's going to be doing a PBD debate, like live debate with Dave Rubin on this. It's like, again, they're not sending their best.
Yeah.
It's like Dave fucking Rubin is like, he's like the final boss apparently for the Zionist structure who's going to like take it to Dave Smith. It's like, what are we doing here? It's like, but like, it's just, that's just one of those things where it's like, the neocons are falling apart intellectually too. They don't have that oomph that they once had.
I mean, and so they have to rely on this terrible set of evidence. So for example, in this, the expert that the Fox News brings in to talk about that, he has a section, a quote that says, "The ODNI report is stuck in the past, a remnant of the fallacious, unclassified 2007 NIE National Intelligence Estimate."
Okay, what is that?
Well, that's based upon, in 2003, there was a national intelligence estimate that suggested this, and this was really the first one to suggest this. And then since then, it's been consistent. But what he doesn't mention is the 2005 annual threat assessment also says this. This is a brand new report for 2005 from the Central Intelligence Agency and the aggregation of all the intelligence agencies, including NSA and all that kind of stuff, to say here's what our actual threats are. And in this, it says Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon. It has a latent nuclear capability. Those are two different things. Ugh. Even then, I'm not sure we should trust David Albright. Why? Because he has been saying this exact same thing about Iran since 2008, sorry. Where in 2008, he said, there was, okay, get this story, Kyle, and how tenuous this is. A Swiss guy had plans on a laptop that
That's right, I remember this.
appear to be a small nuclear device. They found out about it, deleted them, and then an entire media cycle runs, and then who knows who could have got a hold of this? It could be the Iranians.
I remember that. Yeah.
Any day now, they could be bombing us. Did that happen? Did they bomb a place with a suitcase nuclear weapon? No. Maybe it was all made up.
They could have.
Maybe they could have. Maybe that happened. They stopped it. They just didn't tell us like that would ever happen. Yeah, right. All right. Let's go one more section here, and then we'll jump to the meat of his conclusion.
Austria's version of the FBI, the Director at State Protection and Intelligence Service, wrote Monday in an intelligence report, quote, in order to assert and enforce its regional political power ambitions, the Islamic Republic of Iran is striving for comprehensive rearmament with nuclear weapons to make the regime immune to attack and to expand and consolidate its dominance in the Middle East and beyond. The Austrian Domestic Intelligence Agency reported the Iranian nuclear weapons development program is well advanced, and Iran possesses a growing arsenal of ballistic missiles capable of delivering nuclear warheads over long distances, like to the United States.
Nowhere in this article does it say anything about their ability to reach the United States.
Yeah, you actually went and read the article.
Could you find any evidence anywhere that they have intercontinental ballistic missiles, other than Benjamin Netanyahu just saying it? Just saying, well,
That's our source.
We think they could someday, maybe 15 years from now, and he said that a long time ago. So therefore, I said, "Come on, man, come on."
BB has traditionally been a great source for these.
This is serious. This is $1 trillion war or more, right? This maybe many trillions. This is thousands of lives, millions of lives in the Middle East. This is our blood and treasure, and you're dealing with this on this standard, on this low of a standard of vaguely hand waving that they might get it someday, that they might get intercontinental ballistic missiles and reach the United States. No, it has nothing to do with an attack on the United States. It has everything to do with one country in the Middle East. That's it, and defending them. And don't get me wrong, I don't want them to go anywhere. I don't want anyone to be nuked, but I also don't want to go to war with Iran just so that they can maybe not be nuked when they keep saying they're going to get nuked, and then it never happens. For like 40 years now, they've been saying this. So what am I supposed to believe here, Mark? You got to give me better evidence than that, man. You can't come at this and after 20 years of terror war and expect me to get on board with this. This is ridiculous. And his audience should have a higher standard for this. This is absolutely ridiculous.
It's one of those things where it's just like, I don't hate Iran in the way that I'm supposed to hate Iran. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have this like guttural reaction that so many people tend to have, where it's just like, wait, why am I supposed to hate Iran so much? You know, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't really understand why I'm supposed to hate Iran so much.
Well, they didn't let us dominate them, man.
Well, yeah, but it's the same thing.
Because they were going to nationalize British petroleum. Not even American petroleum. It wasn't Standard Oil we went over there and overthrew their country for. It's because they elected a prime minister who said, "Hey guys, I think we should have like a stake in our natural resources, and we're going to nationalize this thing." And we said, "You can't do that, so we're going to overthrow you and install the Shah."
But it's like this thing too, where it's just like most of the Middle Eastern countries, like I don't know why is Israel our greatest ally? Like nobody really tells me and explains to me why they're our greatest ally. It's just and it's not like I hate Israel or I love Israel or I hate Iran and I love Iran. I'm just like politically neutral on them as entities.
It's worse than that, Kyle.
You know?
Western civilization would collapse if Israel didn't exist.
Exactly.
In fact, Western civilization
that's what
only
Douglas Murray
exists
said.
because of Israel when it pre-exists Israel by a lot. By centuries. Thousands of years is Western civilization. Like their depth of understanding of what our culture and our institutions are is so shallow, as if it was made even in 1776. No. These are 1,000-year institutions, like English common law, like separation of powers doctrine. Things like these are old, and you can't just. It's such a relying on people's ignorance of the history to try to make this case, to make it as rich and ontological as possible, rather than actually just arguing what you want. It's so subversive, and it's so meant to just hack the brain, not meant to actually appeal to your reason and actually get you to understand what they really want, because they have to subvert everything with this. Like, it's not really about the thing that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
like that's exactly what it is. Because like I tend to look at the Middle East, and I look at it. I'm just more as like a nerd. I find it to be really interesting, but like it's just the emotional oomph that comes in from a lot of people about Israel or Iran or the Saudis or whatever. And it's like where I just look at it, MBS is a really interesting figure in Saudi Arabia. MBZ in Dubai is a really interesting figure. I'm very curious about the reforms and the economic stuff that's going on there. Like Iran themselves, like I don't really just have this visceral like hatred of them in any meaningful way that I'm like indoctrinated. You're supposed to hate them. Like that's always the thing, is like I'm always cautious, and I kind of made this point on a recent episode on something, I can't remember what it was, where it's just like I'm always very cautious, and I pay very close attention to like, why am I supposed to hate this right now? Yeah. And it's like, you're trying to play tricks on my brain. You're trying to like mind control me right now. And you're doing something right here where you're trying to stoke emotions in me.
Right.
And it's like, what is that? That's where, just like as a person with a podcast, where I would encourage the audience, whenever you feel that or somebody's trying to instill an emotion in you, that's where you got to be like, something's not right here. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. And, I actually understand this point of view. Mm-hmm. I understand where Mark Levin is coming from, because in 2002, I was that, right? I was getting talk radio was where I came from. I had no philosophical or historical background to understand anything else. No one ever told me anything else. I was just operating in the neocon framework, because that's what the water we were swimming in, right? It was like we were attacked for no reason, out of the blue, right? And when you're 17, you're like, yeah, it sure seemed like it. So it's so. And I have such compassion for the people who are stuck there, because they want to be patriots. They want to they want to feel safe. And you constantly have warmongers like this making them feel unsafe, not to get the benefit that they're saying, such as keep America
tricking
safe,
their emotions,
but in order to accomplish other goals, such as regime change and control over oil markets and safety for a foreign country that isn't us. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that I just can't. I can't tolerate that anymore. Once you know something, once you actually learn the history, there's too much to fight back with that. And it makes me mad. The reason why I get so hyped up about this stuff, I watched a generation of my peers lose their life, go there and come back different, or not come back at all. And I won't be quiet about it. And I can't let that go.
Like the amount of veterans that have come back from these things, and you're just like, and that's actually one of those things that's one of the areas that irritates me the most, is there's always like this, you hate our country, you have to support our veterans. And it's just like, man, I've seen the veterans of my generation and where they're at right now. And like the suicide rates in itself, like that should tell you, that's an important data point that should be looked at. And then you have the boomers of this generation, the people that are kind of like in the 60 up standpoint, where they're very disconnected, but they get extremely emotional about it for some reason, because the news tells them that they're supposed to be emotional about it. And they're just like, oh, sorry, Jimmy, you have to go fight this war for me. And it's like, bro, like that's the thing that where you're just like,
there's a generational phenomena going on here, and it's also because 9/11 was right yesterday, and then they didn't pay the cost, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that cost was an inflation. Who does inflation harm? Like financial cost. It harms the poorest people. Who are the poorest people? The youngest people,
and then the newest generation. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you want to know why it's so hard to find a house? Part of it is we started through 2 wars. 3 wars if you count the drone war, maybe 7 wars if you count all the wars that Obama got us into, on the credit card. And we just were going to print all that money away. And that was all the value of the dollar going down. And if you have assets, that's not such a bad thing, because that means your assets inflate.
But if you're 18, you don't have assets.
Exactly. Right. So like all of these, that's beyond our friends and colleagues going off to war and either not coming back or coming back changed. And like that was our Vietnam. And if you can't understand that as a boomer, you're not there's no empathy there.
Well, and that's
right?
the thing, because like
just
the boomers
understand where
dealt
we're
with the
coming from.
Vietnam generation too. Like that's the interesting thing where I feel like there's not a lot of like, and a lot of boomers I know, like they saw the traumatic experience that happened with veterans coming back from Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so it always shocks me of how easily the boomers tend to fall into the new war narratives. Because I have a lot of boomers who have told me their experiences of like their friends that killed themselves after Vietnam, their friends that died in Vietnam, their friends that took certain drugs that the military gave them in Vietnam, things like stuff like that, where it would like tell me a lot of things about things that don't get reported in history about Vietnam, those types of things, right?
Well, and that was also started on a false pretense. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was not an attack. I mean, like it's and we know. I mean, like
so many of our military stuff is like they're all started off these fabrications, USS Liberty, like all this stuff, right?
And they're relying on a confidential report given to the Austrian FBI to try to do another one on nothing. And like this is the case he's going to bring to the Trump administration. Come on. So
well, luckily Tulsi's in there, like,
and JD Vance and other folks who are more skeptical of this stuff, and thank God for that.
I wish we saw more from Tulsi since her time.
She did do a round of interviews recently, but it was
it'd be nice to see more of her. Like I like it could be that I just don't pay as much. Like I pay way more attention to Besant and Lutnick because that's where my interests have been lately, but like it would be nice to see her more publicly facing.
It is Gay Pride Month, so I understand why you want to see Lessa Tulsi.
I want to see more Besant in Gay Pride Month. It's true.
We're just celebrating over here, guys.
Yeah.
All right, so
what a Gay Pride Month! The gayest fight in Twitter history. Glenn Greenwald with Brazilian hookers.
Dude, we're 6 days in. It's gonna be a wild.
This is a wild Pride Month, guys.
All right, let's keep playing and see how he runs it out. And I want to know in this middle time here. He gets into like this anti-American first history lesson. There's just too much to cover.
It'd be boring to cover.
I would like to respond to a lot of it, but there's just too much and we're running out of time. So we're going to jump ahead to like his take home. Like this is why it's the most important message he's ever delivered. Damn it.
See, it's hard. See, guys, I'm normally the one that runs the computer because Dave set this up. I let him run the computer today. You don't understand the struggles that the computer production side guy has to do while also having to talk into a mic. It's really difficult on me.
God.
Go easy on me, guys. And go easy on Dave now.
I'm just going to redo it because I totally fucked it up.
See, especially when we're going through the stop and play of YouTube, it's a lot harder than just pulling up regular things. Yeah, it's hard watching YouTube videos. It's difficult. It's difficult for us in here. You don't understand the struggle.
Avoid war. We want to avoid casualties. We want to avoid dropping bombs, but they don't. They don't. Neither do their communist Chinese supporters who are building up a military to destroy us. Neither does the inbred in North Korea, whose father signed agreement after agreement after agreement, just like the Islamic Nazis in Tehran have, saying they swear off nuclear weapons. We just need energy here. That's all. We gave them money too, just like we gave the Iranians.
So
we signed documents with them too, so forth and so. What the hell is it going to take to realize what we're up against here? This country should be united in its own defense. Nobody's dragging us into anything. It's not the Jews. It's not Israel again. No. Long-range, intercontinental, ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads are for you and me and your children and your grandchildren. That's what it is.
Yeah. So he does it. He does the thing where he says it's not about this country in the Middle East. It's about you.
Yeah.
Like they're going to bomb you. Why does Iran not like the United States?
Because of our just general support of Israel, but also just like our general activities in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Right? Like.
Well, I mean, because they like us when we overthrow the government of Iraq so that they can establish a Shiite, mini state underneath them. But they dislike it when we overthrow their government because they wanted to nationalize their oil company.
Well, and that's the important thing too, is just like understanding that there's a lot of the moves that we've seen from various presidents have been kind of like, oh, we got to placate this group, we got to placate this group. We try to like play ball with everybody sometimes, like, and that's kind of what's led to a lot of the stuff going on in Yemen. Was like the Saudis were really butthurt about the JCPOA and the Iran nuclear deal and all that stuff. Like, and they're the same thing, but but like, so like we end up doing this thing where we kind of like do this thing here, but then it upsets this country over here, and then they get kind of butthurt and they do this thing, and we're like, no, you can't do that. And they're like, yeah, but like, hey, we got to do this because this thing has now set in this train of this train of motions here, and it just becomes this whole like mess to the point where it's just like, maybe we shouldn't be there anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe we should sit back. We can do trade with certain countries. We can play like those types of games, maybe exhibit some soft power here or there. But the whole regime change thing, let them figure this stuff about amongst themselves.
Well, it's also how we've wound up with $36 trillion of debt.
Yes, because we're doing these projects.
Because we're constantly trying to be the policeman of the world and completely appease everybody and not pursue our interests, but rather pursue our partners' interests, specifically Europe's interest.
Yes.
All of this stuff has everything to do with guaranteeing oil, not for us, because we barely import any oil from the Middle East. It's for Europe. And it's to keep Europe from developing themselves and their own military, capability, so that they don't eventually go to war with each other or war with some other part of the world where we have to step in to stop the slaughter. That's the entire theory. And when you realize
the pedophile aristocrats really got to keep the scam going.
The cocaine-fueled pedophile aristocrats who are marrying their uncles, all that shit is all happening just to keep them from doing the things that they might do. And that's when you realize that it has nothing to do with the things that it's sold on. That has to do with a theory that takes away all agency from all the people of Europe to pay their own costs, instead puts it on you, American taxpayer, so that you have to bear the burden of all this stuff, so that your children can go die in Iraq or in Iran or Syria or Libya or whatever, so that they can guarantee their hegemony. That's what it all comes down to at the end of the day. And that's why the whole America First thing that he presents as his whole thesis of this, that they're afraid to go to war, like they don't have the guts, they just want peace and they're just peaceniks. That's where it all falls apart. That's how you get $1 trillion, defense budget. Nearly $1 trillion. We're currently at $904 billion.
We got some wiggle room still. Well, this is actually one of the reasons why I appreciate Trump, and I find him to be such an interesting figure, and why he's actually quite transformative. And I think anyone, hater or lover of Donald Trump, would say that he's a very transformative president, one of the most transformative, strangely enough, is because the geopolitical dynamics at play here are just very different from what we've had in the past. I think like the libertarians would have certain critiques here and there of various things, but when we're talking about like the types of moves he make, you realize that there is a different game that he's playing from all of the other people. And we see that with the Saudi side and kind of the recent Middle Eastern trip. We see that with his kind of blatant animosity towards the EU. We see that even just on the financial regime of him installing Jay Powell as the Fed chairman, is Jay Powell is a very different central banker from the central bankers we've had in the past, who are much more Eurocentric in their outlooks. Like Jay Powell is much more of the New York mafia guy who is wrestling back monetary control from the Europeans, right? Right. You see, and when you understand all of those dynamics, we're just a major theme of the Trump administration on geopolitics, on finances, on trade, and all that stuff. It's wrestling back American control over these things that have been controlled by outside interests for largely. Right. That's actually the key takeaway of what the Trump administration is.
And what's funny is he actually goes into this and criticizes realism. He said, "No, you're not. You're actually just being realistic." Well, geez, Mark, I kind of feel like we have problems here in the United States that we have trade-offs for handling.
Yeah.
Right? And as long as we're running this deficit, we cannot just cut social spending. Think about it for a minute. We're going to cut social spending, which I don't agree with. I'm a libertarian. I don't I think all that stuff should be private. But are we really going to increase the defense budget to $1 trillion?
At the expense of social spending.
At the expense of social spending, so that we can guarantee Europe doesn't build an army someday.
That's actually one of the things that often makes conservatives look bad, is because like liberals will be like, we want to stop the funding of the things that kill people and we want to fund the things that don't kill people. Well, the conservatives are like, nah, we really want to fund the things that kill people and defund the things that help people. You know, like even though like again, like I'm also just very libertarian on the social spending, like on just spending as a whole. Like I think everything should be cut down drastically and put into a much more realistic budget side of things, if not just go to zero over the long run. But like that is one of the things that make conservatives look bad in the public eye, and it makes the narratives run wild too, where it's just like on the BBB, for instance, right, where it's just like they're cutting Medicaid, the money that's going to help people, and meanwhile jacking up spending on the military. You know, like that.
It's the stereotype.
Optics doesn't look
And that's what shows that you're not serious about it, because do we need $1 trillion defense budget? The next biggest spender on defense in the world is China. Guess how much they spend on defense?
Oh, far less than us, yeah.
$300 billion.
Yeah. I was going to say it's like a third, yeah.
We spend more than the next 25 countries combined, including China.
Yeah, China and Russia are the biggest ones, but they dwarf. Like they're tiny compared to what we spend.
That is to maintain the global empire. That is to maintain global hegemony at all costs, including the American taxpayer benefit, right? So like all of the things that you look to, when you look to inequality, right, what the left is complaining about, now the right is starting to complain about. When you look to how difficult it is to get from the lower classes to the middle class, all of those things are a result of inflation. Inflation exists because of low interest rates, boom bust cycles, and deficit spending. The deficit spending thing we have to tackle, and they refuse to on the defense because of people like Mark Levin saying the Iranians are going to nuke us any day now, even though there's no evidence of that.
Well, and it's one of those things too where it's just like the core of the America First idea and why being generally anti-war was very appealing to the America First ideology as it's been developing is things like, yo, our infrastructure at home sucks.
Yeah.
like why are we spending all this money in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Why are we spending all and it's just like can we not at least like let's not even tackle spending. Let's just like divert that spending into things that actually help us here. Because like I don't understand why Ukraine matters to me. Yes. Like that's like the American America First ethos is like, explain to me why Ukraine matters.
Right. And
like nobody can explain it. Like, and that's kind of like what I was saying with the Israel thing. Is like, why is Israel our greatest ally? Like I like nobody's ever really, it's just like, well, because they are, and Western civilization would fall if it does. It's just like, no, that's like an ideological axiom that you're proposing to me that doesn't make sense. Like, why does that axiom make sense? Why? Like, make a case for it. Explain it to me.
100%.
You know, like.
Yeah, and it's worse than that. Like, he goes beyond even Iran and the end of this rant that we got to cover because it's kind of hilarious, to be honest.
And if they get them, they will use them in due course, if not sooner. They will change the entire Middle East. And you'll say, who cares? Yeah, who cares? Who cares about that? Who cares about Europe? Who cares about anything, right? Wrong.
Who cares about Europe?
One day we'll turn around and we don't have any allies. And the enemy will be lined up. You know, they're in our hemisphere. They're in Central and South America. Oh, yes, they are. They're in the Arctic Circle, which is why the president talks about Greenland. They have a West Africa base to the communist Chinese now. They have a base in the Solomon Islands now. What do you think they're doing? You think they're going fishing? The good news is Donald Trump is not one of these people. He's not an isolationist. He's bombed Yemen. He's taken out Soleimani and Baghdadi. He does what he needs to do. But this is a force that continues to try to pressure him, pressure congressional Republicans, pressure people like me to keep our mouths shut. Never. Never.
Yeah, I'm sure you get a lot of pressure to keep your mouth shut on Fox News, buddy. So why do we have enemies in Central America? Why aren't we friends with Central America?
Oh, well, I mean, you can just look at everything Bukele said over the last time. It's like the sheer amount of shenanigans that come in from like both the CIA propping up cartels,
NED, USAID.
Yeah, the USAID stuff, all of the soft power stuff that goes on, and really just like American involvement in the cartel structure is something that it's like you could look at the cartels in a similar vein to Middle Eastern terror groups. Like they have there's a similar DNA in pattern, and we're doing the same type of stuff there and undermining efforts and kind of overthrowing governments there. But it's a little bit, the exact tactic is different, but we do the same type of structure. It's the same pattern.
The reason why we have hostile people around the world is in fact because we've been, in the last 100 years, running around with a rogue CIA, doing all kinds of stuff that destroys countries, leads to decades of civil war, such as in Guatemala, hundreds of thousands of deaths in these places that go largely unacknowledged, but understood in those countries as a phenomena of foreign policy, of an intentional choice. Americans are simply unaware of it. It's just like when 9/11 happened and people are like, why did it happen? And the answer was, well, they hate you for your freedoms. Not, well, this has actually been our policy in the Middle East for a long time. And this is their actual motives. Even if the motives don't justify the action, these were their motives. And if you can't understand, they banned the Osama bin Laden letter on TikTok because they can't let you know the actual motives.
Well, that's actually where the TikTok ban narrative all stemmed from, was the bin Laden letter in the midst of all of the Israel-Hamas stuff. Because you had a bunch of like high school students being like, what the fuck? I never learned this in high school.
Exactly.
Right.
And, of course, he's talking about, and then the other side of that argument is he mentions one base that China has outside of China. How many bases does the United States have outside of the United States?
It's like 500.
Over 800.
Is it 800?
Over 800 in over 70 countries. And this is that, well, we can't let anyone else have projection of power anywhere because this is the American century. For 100 years, we've ruled the world, and we need to continue ruling the world at all costs, even the cost of America. And that is why you're not America first, Mark Levin, is because you don't care what happens to America or Americans. You care about the global empire, about maintaining control of the world. But that is the ultimate hubris. It is the ultimate anti-conservative point of view. The conservative point of view is that we can't know the future and we can't design the world. That's the Hayekian lesson, is that in our institutions and in our traditions are embedded wisdom. And that embedded wisdom is that you can't go abroad looking for monsters to slay. You can't design the world. You can take care of yourself and mind your own business. That was on our coinage when we started as a country. That lesson has been completely lost since World War II. And we have to get back to it. That is the conservative message. It is not learn nothing in the last 25 years, think of nothing in the last 100 years. All you have to do is know about one incident that happened one time called World War II, and therefore everyone's Hitler forever. Everyone's about to take over the world and dominate the world and destroy Europe. We have to control the world forever, regardless of the impact or what the costs and trade-offs are. You don't care about those things, and that's why you don't care about America.
And it's also, too, is like, and this is kind of also going with along the Trump pivot in geopolitical strategy. Besant, a couple months ago, had a speech where he was criticizing the past use of things like the IMF and the way that we have approached in the past. This is kind of going back to your point about Central America, where in the past it became this kind of bludgeoning tool where it's just like you have to do this green energy stuff and you have to do these social programs in order for your loans to get through and all this stuff. And Besant kind of critiqued that, that's a very European influence on the IMF strategy. Whereas like we can use these institutions like the IMF to actually make the world prosper, but we can't be doing it the way that we've been doing it in the past with these like crony agendas that come in with it and then using it as this control mechanism. What we need to know is, are we getting a return on the loan that is being made for these countries in order for them to actually come out better? And he looked at Argentina as the premier example of they gave their plan, they're executing the plan, they're doing it very effectively. That should be the shining example of actually using these things for like, if we're going to do this loan structure of helping these countries recover in whatever, Argentina is the model, right? Instead of doing this thing where it's just like, what they tried to do in El Salvador in the past. And then when Bukele started doing his own thing and we're like, we're going to start a Bitcoin strategic reserve and we're going to, instead they're just like, the dude's a terrorist. He's awful. He's like, right. Like, like we can have like this, and this would be a non-isolationist framework. This would help us with our kind of like New York financial schemes that we implement, especially as we wrestle back that control from London and from Brussels and things like that, is like we can do these things and help the country prosper through like economics and through finance and through trade and through like, this is the approach that we should be taking, not like just these massive regime change adventurous ideas in places like the Middle East. We can do stuff like the recent Trump deals in Qatar and in Saudi Arabia. And like, we can work with Erdogan and Turkey. We can come together and actually have like peaceful negotiation. We can trade goods. We can do this. This can be the way that we influence the world and be the shining light on the hill. We can do that, right?
That vision is the contra-vision, and it's the old vision. It's the vision of the old right. It was the vision of the founding fathers to trade and engage with the world peacefully. And we have so drifted away from that, you know, I cannot overstate how profoundly disappointing it is to see people like Mark Levin continue to get viewership and continue to see as credible when he puts together these terrible cases based on nothing to shriek for more war and to shriek for the same old thing that's been destroying our country for 20 years, and then not support the president in actually pursuing peace. I mean, like, you have this opportunity to do it now. You're not going to get it with the Democrats the next time they come in, and you're not going to get it with a neocon. So just change, dude.
Well, the good news is it's generational. Like his audience is generational. He doesn't have the appeal of young people under 60. Like it is a generational shift that's happened. And in general, people under 40 are very skeptical of this stuff, right and left, on both sides. Like even just like the blind Israel, that
change has been substantial.
Yeah, like the blind Israel circle jerk that has existed over for so many decades. Like people under 40 are just kind of like, it's kind of like what I said.
Yeah,
it's just like,
why?
Yeah, well, it's either, and it's actually, I'll remember when Tim Pool had that like secret podcaster meeting with Bibi, Tim Pool had reported back on his show, the thing that he said to Bibi was the left hates Israel and the right, like when it comes to young people, the left hates Israel and the right doesn't care about Israel. Like when it comes to people under 40. So Israel has a massive marketing problem right now. And that's something that Israel, you as a prime minister of your country, should be wary of. Like that's what's going on in your country as this war continues right now. Yeah. It's like, and your influence games are no longer working here.
Oh, and I can't point this out enough, and maybe we'll end on this. Why is Iran increasing nuclear fuel production now? Well, when did that start? The ramp up started in October of 2 years ago, functionally. It was in response to in 2021. So Biden was attempting to start a new deal. They did not have an increase then. Israel did a sabotage attack on a nuclear facility. The response from Iran was to increase their production of 60% grade nuclear fuel. This is a response to other things that are happening.
Yes.
This is not a keyhole that you're looking through to get a snapshot in time now. There's a story here of an interchange between three countries that goes back a long ways. And if you and this is the thing that is so frustrating about this kind of segment, is that it doesn't ask you to learn anything. It just asks you to ingest entertainment and feel righteous about it, and then advocate for a thing that's against your interests.
It's sort of like Ukraine, like right, where it's like there's a thing that happens. We're supposed to, or Israel Hamas, the October 7th stuff. Yeah, right. Like it's like there's a thing that happens. We're supposed to very hyper fixate on that thing, but like ignore all the stuff prior to that. That is the lead up to that, which gives a lot more context and makes you understand both sides better. Yes, right. Like and lets you approach it with some nuance. Like Ukraine is the same way, where it's just like, oh my God, Russia invaded Ukraine. We're just like, okay. Now, what's the context of that? But no, everybody wants to have the talking point as like, well, I'm against a country invading another country unlawfully, right? Like, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's nice to virtue signal about that, but like, let's have a little bit more understanding here and bring it above a kindergarten level.
What are the motives of the actors at play, and how do you disrupt those motives with new incentives to break the cycle of violence? And that is the one thing he cannot allow happen. He has to continue warmongering, and that is the SCIF today. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for being a member. If you're a member, if you're not a member, join so you can get the huge backlog of
This will probably be one that goes out public.
Yeah. 49, other than this one, episodes. This is our 50th episode of the SCIF.
Yeah.
49 other episodes that you could check out where we get into conspiracy theories, where we get into, deep historical stuff, where we get into the French president's first lady.
Brigitte Macron is a dude.
And all that stuff. Go check it out, humanreactionpod.com. Get yourself a t-shirt, get yourself a hat, and become a member. Thank you so much for watching.
Peace.